Looking back on my preliminary task, I've learned a few things from back then to our main task. Basically, when it comes to the quality of holding our shot steady, we were able to use a tripod a lot more often in the preliminary task than we did in the main task because basically we were using a larger variety of shots during our uh, main task rather than the preliminary task because we were using shots such as tracking shots and shots that basically moved with the character. So we couldn't use a tripod then, so the shots weren't quite steady as we want. Maybe when we do it again, we could use maybe a trolley or something like that so we can keep the shot a lot steadier than it would be. The quality of the framing shots in our main task were a lot better than in our preliminary task because we used a larger variety of shots which allowed us to fit the character in a lot of different frames, and also we took more time out to fit them in the shot so you would see more of the character and you could differentiate between all the different shots, which made it a lot easier. The quality of the shooting material appropriate to the task set was a lot better in the main task than in the preliminary task for a few reasons. Simply because the first reason is the location that we chose was a lot better in the main task than it was in the preliminary task because we wanted to create a mood and kind of follow the genre of our film and follow the conventions of that. Whereas in the preliminary task we didn't have a specific genre, which meant that there wasn't a lot of things that we could do to the location to cause certain moods and stuff like that, so we didn't really have a specific genre to go for. And we wanted to make the main film a lot more realistic than the preliminary task. The preliminary task wasn't that realistic because the script and the location, it didn't really make it that realistic compared to the main task where we were trying very hard to sort of convey a certain genre about it. The quality of the mise-en-scene in the main task was a lot better than the preliminary task, again, because we were paying a lot more attention to things like colour, lighting and costume, simply because we saw in the preliminary task we didn't convey a lot in that, and as we were in the main task we were trying to convey certain things like gender and age. We really needed to use mise-en-scene like lighting and especially costume to convey those certain things, and we really learned from the preliminary task that it does help a lot to create a certain mood amongst the audience. And so basically, for example, in our main film we used a white t-shirt on the victim to make them seem a lot more innocent, and whereas in the preliminary task we basically didn't pay any attention to the costume whatsoever, and we didn't pay any attention to lighting at all. In the main task, again with lighting, we made sure that there were areas of darkness and light to be specific to that area of the film and to give a certain feel and a certain tension to it. Our editing for our main film was a lot more in-depth than in the preliminary task. The preliminary task was quite scrappy when it came to transitions, and we didn't really use that many techniques. But in the main task, we really made an effort to get the transitions very smooth so that the whole film flows, and we used techniques, especially in our main film, with the fade in and fade out technique for the transitions, because it really does cause a lot more tension than just a straight transition. We also used, right towards the end of the film, we used a distortion on the camera to show you through the eyes of the killer, which I think really helped create a certain mood for the film and form certain conventions as well, because you see it in a number of slasher films. We really learnt this through the preliminary task because it was quite clear that you could see the film wasn't flowing, and you could see that it just didn't flow very well, and you can really tell the difference in the main task. Sound changed drastically from our main task to our preliminary task simply because in our preliminary task we didn't use any non-diegetic sound, which basically meant you didn't really get a feel for the film at all. You didn't really get a certain mood from the film. Whereas in the main task, we really wanted to cause tension in it. As you see in a lot of horror films, the tension is all built up through music, and we used a lot of music and a lot of non-diegetic sound to cause that tension in our film. And basically, we learned from the preliminary task it really helps in changing the mood and influencing the audience reaction to your film if you have music and certain non-diegetic sound. Both the positioning and the movements drastically changed from our preliminary task to our main task, simply because the main task, the actors were a lot more free to move about in the shot, whereas in the preliminary task, you see that they're in a small confined room and they're not really moving that much, well, because they're sitting down. And in the main film, all of it's done standing up, and there's a lot of movement, and it just basically allows us to convey more, because the character movement tells you a lot, basically, about that character and about the personality of the character. Whereas when they're sitting down, it's very hard to gauge where the character's at in that. The group had to be a lot more organised in the main task than in the preliminary task, because basically we were filming outside of school rather than in school as we were in the preliminary task. We were filming outside of school, so we had to really work around the school's timetable to meet up for certain filming, and basically we had to go around and out of our way to organise meetings. From the preliminary to the main task, the group dynamics were basically the same, because we were working just as hard in both tasks, and we both, in both tasks, we really motivated each other.